Hey everybody, Tom Barnes stories from the 78. Big day on the 78, my friends. I'm talking about a guest that has been on The Simpsons, Everybody Hates Chris, Frasier, Seinfeld, A Different World, been in movies like Waiting to Exhale and Edmund and Under Siege 2, lots of things. And now he wrote a book called Family Business about the four generations of his family, the entertainment industry out in Los Angeles. I am pleased to welcome Wren T. Brown. How are you, sir?
It is a pleasure to meet you, Tom. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And is it four generations of entertainers in your family going all the way back to great grandparent?
That's exactly right. The story begins with my great grandfather, Willis Handy Young. He's born in Thibodaux, Louisiana in 1872. He was a choir master, he's a multi instrumentalist, he's an arranger, and at one point they say he could take a job on 20 different instruments. He was a teacher of music, and most particularly, he taught his children. He had three children, his youngest being my maternal grandfather, Lee Young Sr. My grandfather was a drummer. He was Nat King Cole's drummer and musical director for 25 years. He was the first black staff musician in the history of Hollywood, Columbia Pictures, 1946. He made his first records in December of 1937 with Fats Waller. He had been the drummer for Ethel Waters in 1936. And so there's a rich, rich history right with that family, but it begins with my great grandfather.
I mean, you just rattled off some Hollywood royalty and music royalty, if you will. I mean, and then there's your career as well. I mean, you did all these things, and you opened up your own theater company out in Los Angeles and continue that legacy forward. Is that why you wanted to do this book, just to talk about what was started and what you want to give paying it forward?
That's exactly right. You know, when I really discovered with my great grandfather, when he founded his theatrical troupe, the New Orleans Strutters, in the aughts of the 20th century, he employed 22 to 25 people, and they traveled this entire country performing for people all over America. And when I realized that in 2008, I found the Ebony Repertory Theater, which is the first and only African American professional theater in the history of Los Angeles. And so I looked back 100 years earlier with my great grandfather and what I was doing with Ebony Rep. And those bookends suggested to me that there was a book in between those things. And so that's how everything came about. And paying it forward, and my definition of producer is the producing of opportunity. And I believe in that very deeply.
Absolutely. And before we go further, we talked a little bit about this before we started the recording, but I just so happen to have this record here. I'm going to hold it up back here. And you said that you didn't see it before, or you've never, sorry, I'm going to move this back. You said you haven't seen it before, but then I was looking and on the back here, and I'm seeing if the camera will show this, but there it is, your grandfather's name, playing drums in 1953 in Chicago at the Blue Note Theater right off of Madison Street. Look at that. Kind of cool
Yeah,
that I'm holding a piece of your family history right in my hands.
you know, Tom, I have to tell you, a part of launching this book, discovering things just like I've discovered with your sharing of that album from the Blue Note in 1953. I had never been aware of that record. I've never seen that cover. And to know
Never.
that I can get it and to hear my grandfather playing those traps with Nat King Cole is going to be, I know, already a joy for me.
Well, I mean, I'm almost flattered to even be the person to do that for you, but I mean, not almost. I am flattered to be the person to do that for you because it was such a. I love old Chicago history and old Chicago music, and when I got that, I knew Nat King Cole was here in Chicago for a long time before he went out to Los Angeles, and that's kind of the one of the stories. I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but you're playing with Nat King Cole in Chicago, and then them coming back here to play at the Blue Note and other theaters was part of that story, right?
Absolutely. I mean, so many times did my grandpa Lee particularly play Chicago. My paternal grandfather, Troy Brown, Sr., who was from Memphis, Tennessee, he was the fifth black actor in Screen Actors Guild. He was on the first ever show at the Apollo Theater, Tom, January 26, 1934. Played the London Palladium at the height of the Depression in 1933. He worked in Chicago a great deal. But it's very interesting. The last time my grandfather Lee Young sat behind a set of drums was with Andy Williams in Chicago at the Palmer House. He had left Nat King Cole, and Andy Williams said to him, Lee, I really want you to come play these 3 weeks with me. He said, Andy, I'm retired. And he said, Lee, please come. And he said, I'll pay for your green fees so you can play golf every day. And they worked for 3 weeks at the Palmer House, and that was his last official time sitting behind the drums on a gig in his career.
Wow. In the Palmer House, I mean, that I think it's called the Empire Room in the Palmer House. That's like one of the ballrooms, right? I mean, it's stunningly beautiful. The lobby's beautiful, and I imagine that's where they played up in that ballroom there. I mean, what is the stories like when this happens? And you, I'm sure as you're talking about your family's legacy throughout all these interviews, have there been things aside from this that have popped up that you didn't know, that you were like, how did I not know about this? How come Grandpa didn't tell me, or how come somebody didn't tell me?
Absolutely, and that's been a part of, I tell people all the time, Tom, you search for something, and once you discover a bit of it, then you begin the research. And discovering things has been a part of the joy of this experience. I mean, looking at a 1938 article in the California Eagle that references my paternal grandmother and my father, but then there's a name in the article, and I go and research the name, and it turns out this woman was the lead in the film where my father, at 4 years old, was a principal actor in. I didn't know about this particular film, and that discovery, to hear my father's voice and to see him animate his personality at 4 years old, was stunning to me.
Ah, it's like a treasure trove of your family history, just kind of finding it through these archives. And do you have any, were you fortunate enough to be able to see any of these folks perform live yourself as you were growing up?
No, I never knew my father's parents at all. My father's mother was a cotton club dancer, and she really, around 1940, she gave up her career, and because she felt that 2 actors in one household was quite enough. And she states that in an article, yet again, in the California Eagle. No, I never saw my grandparents work at all. I spent copious amounts of time with my mother's parents, but I never saw them perform. I saw them do things around the house. I heard all their stories. I sat at their knee, but at the end of the day, I never got a chance to see them actually perform.
It's almost, I mean, a little sad, I suppose, that, maybe they didn't, just have the piano right there and play. But I imagine to turn that off, right, and to be a focused family and not be on the road or perform, maybe it was hard for them to continue that at home. Maybe, what do you think? Why didn't they just make it more known for you, or was it just the way it was back then?
Well, I think it was just the way it was. I mean, my grandmother retired in the 50s, my mother's mother. But my grandfather, once he left the stage as a musician, he became a record executive until officially around 1983. He left Motown Records in 1983 as the head of the creative division, and he had a production company called Straight Life Productions where he produced several albums. So throughout my life, I saw him as the first black chapter president of NARAS at the LA chapter of NARAS. I watched him through his career at ABC Records and Motown Records. So I did get a chance to see my grandfather work in that way. But as a musician, no. And for my grandmother as a torch singer and dancer, no. But she did sing around the house sporadically.
Ah, that had to be special.
Yes.
You probably didn't even know how special it was when it was happening, just because when you're a kid growing up, it always seems like you don't really appreciate something until after the fact, and then you're like, oh my goodness, that was normal, but to other people that was very not normal, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Throughout your career, you've done a lot of things, a lot of television and theater and movies and everything else. What would be something that you, if they were here today, would you want to present to them? Is it this book? Is it a combination of this book and something else where you can have a conversation with them and be like, here, you did all this and now I want to show you this?
My maternal grandfather saw a lot of my career. He saw me found Ebony Repertory Theater, and I would love to show them that the canvas that I've been able to paint on was larger than the one that they were offered and given, and that they fought for. They walked through the tall grass on behalf of those who came after them, and I would love to display to them that, see, this canvas is not only larger, but hopefully this great-grandson and this grandson painted in such a way that made them proud. And so This book, which is a compilation of all of their stories in the arts and my story as well, it brings me joy because I feel like I'm on the road with them. And it really gives me chill bumps on my arms. It really gives me goosebumps, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine, like hearing the story, you telling it, reading part of the book. I mean, it sounds like it would be like a 8 episode Netflix documentary type of style of storytelling. Because, like you said, there is so much to see, and your family did things back in a time where African Americans didn't have those opportunities, like you said. But your family somehow they blazed that trail all the way to Los Angeles and did that thing where you mentioned some of the accolades that like I think you said your great grandfather was the 4th or 5th Screen Actor Guild.
Yeah, my grandfather, Troy Brown Sr., was the 5th Black Actor in Screen Actors Guild. I mean, people don't know Screen Actors Guild was founded in 1933, but it was not recognized by the producers until 1937. So he joins in 36. He comes from New York to do a film called Can This Be Dixie with Jane Withers and Slim Somerville. So early in that process of the talking motion pictures, because the transition to talking pictures was 1929, and so in 1936 he's right here. And in fact, he made a film in 1929 called Asleep at the Switch.
Wow. What do you think it was about your family back then that had that, it's an old-fashioned word, I suppose, that gumption, that drive, that fortitude to do not just be a part of it, but kind of rise to the top?
You know, it's very interesting that you asked that question because I often wonder where the gumption came from, where the temerity came from with them during these times, because these were terrifying times in the larger society where they found themselves, and certainly the industry as a microcosm of America at that time. These things were deeply segregated. There was malignant racism all around. But where did this stuff come from? And I often wonder, but I'm so glad they found the gumption to do what they did, because maybe it was just really what they were called to do. And I don't mean called in some sort of lofty elitist way, but maybe their journeys were absolutely intended to be as artists, telling stories and being storytellers, because the courage that it took during those times is just unbelievable in my mind.
When you were doing the research and everything else, looking through all of these old newspaper clippings that you found, what is the one thing that stood out that surprised you the most in this whole process?
Well, there are several things that stood out in this search and the research process, but one of the things that just struck me about those times in the late 30s, there was a columnist for the Pittsburgh Courier, and they called him Uncle Bob. And Uncle Bob wrote one day, because my grandfather Troy Brown was on the road, and his family, my grandmother and my father, were in Los Angeles, and Uncle Bob wrote in the newspaper, "Troy Bear Brown Jr. is not well, call home." You know, and was extraordinary in the newspaper, knowing that somewhere on that tour he would pick up the Pittsburgh Courier and read it and then call, his wife on behalf of what's going on with Junior. So that struck me, that was extraordinary to me.
Yeah, I mean, you think about back then, there wasn't, you couldn't text anybody, there was no internet. The phone was still kind of not like what it is now at all, right? It was, a novelty item as far as, it was expensive to have, so it wasn't readily available. I mean, it's just go on and on of all these things. When you were looking through this process and finding anything, did your any of the family members have like specific cities that really spoke to them when they were, entertaining?
Yes, it's very interesting. My grandfather, Troy Brown Sr., he writes very affectionately in letters about Toronto. Oh. Very interesting. And, particularly around 1942, he wrote a very wonderful letter to a family in Harlem, New York. But he wrote affectionately through that period about, I beg your pardon, it was Montreal.
Okay.
It was Montreal. I beg your pardon. I said Toronto. It was Montreal where he was writing from. So that place struck him. And whenever he played his home city of Memphis, Tennessee, he would write and love to gather, of course, with his mother and siblings and their extended family and friends.
I mean, I imagine it's just always when you go home like that to Memphis for him, a big party, a welcoming, like what you would wish in your mind what it would be, probably, but even better with the live music, the smell of the food, and everything else. Was there anything in there that you found that was just completely, like, not shocking, but surprising for you, where you're like, oh, like I had no idea. I mean, no, we've had a couple of those already, but is there any other things that stand out to you that was something that just completely blew your mind?
Well, yes. I mean, the reality of it is that again, that both of my grandmothers began their careers at 16 years old.
Hell, yeah.
You know, they were Cotton Club dancers, one in the New York Cotton Club, one in the Los Angeles Cotton Club. Now, the Los Angeles Cotton Club was called Frank Sebastian's Cotton Club, and it was actually in Culver City, California, which is just one block removed from Los Angeles proper, if you will. But at the end of the day, just knowing that they began their careers at 16, both of them, and I discovered that about my paternal grandmother when she started working at the Standard Theater, which was a great notable theater in Philadelphia prior to going to New York during the Harlem Renaissance and being a part of Irving C. Miller's Brown Skin Models and then the Cotton Club.
Yeah. And I imagine just finding those photos and seeing these family members at different times in their lives had to be a lot of fun. I mean, I get a kick out of looking at it and seeing my mom when she was, in her mid 20s, with my dad in his mid to late, excuse me, late 20s. So I imagine seeing, people, I hate to use the word in their prime, but when they were younger doing that thing, but starting at 16 years old, that's insane.
Absolutely. And one of the things, my father gave me the scrapbooks of his parents and whom I did not know. And coming to know them, knowing that my grandmother and grandfather, they had touched all of that material that I was now touching, it would give me chills. And to come to know them through that scrapbook and to see their careers, to see them in their youth, really always touched me in a very deep and abiding way. And it's very interesting. My maternal grandfather, Lee Young Sr., who was my living hero, I fell in love with him when I was 10 years old. And he was 60, and until his passing in 2008, we had an absolutely inseparable relationship. But I have more of the grandfather I didn't know, of his belongings, than of the grandfather I did know. My grandfather did not keep a lot of his career. There's a lot documented of his career, but he did not keep a lot. So it's very interesting, those two dynamics.
Oh man, I can talk to you forever about these things just because I've done something similar in my family, just going through old photographs, from the 1940s, a lot of World War II stuff, and it just to go back and be able to see your family at an age that you didn't know them, to see them, younger, is just an incredible lens to see your family, especially the family you didn't know very well, to then find out stories about them through people telling you, or things that are now archived on the internet or in a library or what have you, right?
Yes, absolutely. It is. It really has been a great joy. And when I open the book, even today, having written it and produced it, if you will, I'm still struck by certain things. I love, the use of a certain language of that period. I love the lettering and the fonts used of that period, of the 30s and 40s and even the 20s. So it still engages me and fascinates me even when I look at it.
Yeah, there's an elegance to that era, with the font and the storytelling and the decor inside of a hotel, from that
Absolutely.
era. So I completely agree. I imagine having the theater company that you have is a great legacy for you, but also pays homage to everybody before you. Was that all in that process when you wanted to open up your own theater company, or was that just something that you just wanted to do for you?
It was all in the process of what you've just shared and articulated. I almost named the theater company the Apex Repertory Theater because all four of my grandparents had played the Apex Club on Central Avenue here in Los Angeles. So I was going to name it as an homage to them. But then I realized, Wren, what is it or what was it that first touched you? And I remember at about 6 years old walking with my four older siblings past the Ebony Showcase Theater in Los Angeles. And I pointed up and I asked my only sister, what is that? And she said, that's a marquee. And the marquee said the Ebony Showcase Theater. And so when it came time to found Ebony Repertory Theater, I named it in honor of the first marquee I had ever seen.
Man, talk about happenstance when you walk somewhere and you see something and it carries with you through the rest of your life. That is one of
Yes.
those moments for you, and it's been an incredible time to talk to you about your family's history, your legacy, and everything wrapped up into your lovely book, The Family Business, which is out now. People can buy it. Is there a spot you would like for people to go to find it?
Yes, thefamilybusinessbook.com. Thefamilybusinessbook.com. And Tom, if I may say something prior to our leaving this wonderful conversation, your respect and sensitivity in this conversation is deeply, deeply appreciated by me. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. And thank you for just wanting to share it with somebody you've never met before. And the first time we meet is through the digital age that we are. But, you know, a great story is a great story. And the connection to the record that I have in my house, that was, I'm blown away at that. So as soon as I'm done, I'm going over to my turntable, which is right there. And I'm going to put on this record one more time for folks to see it. But it was Nat King Cole. And he was
Wow.
at the Blue Note in Chicago in 1953, and on drums, the very own Lee Young. So, my goodness, what a fun way to wrap up a story, but people can buy the book. Are you ever finding your way in Chicago, or do you think you might be in Chicago for a book tour or a
Absolutely.
play or something like that coming up?
Yes, I'm planning to be in Chicago in the next 2 months, and I'd love to reach out and let you know when I'm going to be there.
Yes, we'll look forward to it then. Thank you so much for taking time to chat with me.
Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate you.